Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today I'm joined by Mr. Editor-in-Chief Jak-Luke Sharp and Nicolò Grasso to discuss Twisters, Lee Isaac Chung's reimagining of the original film, not quite a remake, but also not quite a sequel. The film follows a woman named Kate Carter who lives in New York after suffering some terrible trauma chasing storms, but when an old friend reappears and asks for her help, she travels back down to Oklahoma for one more week of trying to track and trying to scan the big one, with the hopes that if you scan a tornado, we can learn why it's made and how we can destroy it to help protect homes and cities in its path. While there, she meets the arrogant social media mogul Tyler Owens, played by Glenn Powell, and a possible romance blooms. I mean, it's Twisters, you kind of know what you're getting here. Look, we were all pretty excited for the film, but to be honest, it didn't quite live up to our expectations. Today we discuss what exactly went wrong with Twisters, why we think it's a pretty disappointing entry into the modern blockbuster genre, and ultimately where we think the film went wrong. Thank you so much for listening and supporting us on ClapperCast. Now let's get to our review of Twisters. Okay, and Nick, I'm going to turn over to you first to start our discussion on Twisters. A week late, feels like it's been 3 years, but you know what? We're still here. We're still talking about Twisters. Go, start it off. Jack disappeared. Jack disappeared for a second, so I was just concerned about that. But now you can continue.
I was very excited to go watch Twisters, honestly, because I don't really care for Minari, the previous film of the director Lee Isaac Chung. Hot take. It's a movie I kind of hate some ways. It has ruined friendships. So I was like, okay, I really care for the director, but I really like the first Twisters. I don't love it. It's a flawed film, undeniably so, but it's charming, it's engaging, it's full of fun little quirks from the 90s, and it is a visual spectacle for the time that still holds up because of the element of fun. And so I was looking forward to this. That's my boy Glenn Powell, It looked amazing from the trailers. There's like one specific trailer, I don't know which one it was, like played in the theaters that I was in, where it would be like TWIS, like building up to the full name. I was like, holy shit, it's Twisters. And so I go watch it. I didn't have time to have dinner. I was doing other things for work. So I get like a large nachos box, man. Free dips, cream cheese, the spicy jalapeno one, and whatever the like yogurty one is. Eating those nachos, man, was the absolute peak of my experience watching this movie. It just left me empty. And in a way, I kind of went through the 5 stages of grief watching it because it finished. I was like, that's not bad. It's pretty good. Chuckled a couple of times. The action scenes were kind of thrilling. It wasn't bad. And then it took me just like a 1 hour long train ride home to understand that the film wasn't really that good. It's very hollow emotionally, hollow even artistically in terms of the spectacle that it creates, and completely hollow in terms of its politics. So I'm very excited to talk about this film, which I was, again, looking forward to. They duped me. I got sucked in by the marketing. I don't know how they did it, but the chemistry in the promotional campaigns is way, way stronger than any of the chemistry any of the actors have with each other in the actual film. So, first thoughts. Curious to know what you guys think.
I'm so happy we decided to still do this podcast because this is already one of the best. Similar to you, I was so pumped for this film. I don't care that much for Minari. I don't hate it. I don't have this weird, like, long vendetta history like you do. I think that's something a therapist should unpack one day because that's a very weird film for that.
It happened. We talked about it.
I love the original Twister. If you watched one of our rapid reviews a while back, we talked about how much I love Twister. So I was really excited for the film. Didn't watch any of the trailers because I don't really watch trailers, but was pumped for this. And I agree, I was really, really let down. I'm a little bit more positive on some of the things, such as performances as you, but like considering this is a story from Joseph Kosinski, who brought us Top Gun Maverick, 5-star masterpiece as far as like bringing a property back and creating something really worthwhile with it. The film for the first half is just so lost in what it's trying to be. The politics are all over the place. Perspective is all over the place. I don't know why Anthony Ramos is in this film at all. I would love for someone to be able to tell me that. It did very little for me. And then once in the second half, it starts getting into being just a romance film, back to basics with twisters. I really enjoyed it until the ending, which makes a strange choice, which I'm sure we'll get into, as all the internet has. I would say the biggest thing that pissed me off about this film is the visuals. I think the visuals are, I mean, there's some good work with skies and stuff, specifically like between this and Nope, we've really learned how to make some clouds. But the actual twisters themselves and the lack of practical effects really bugged me here, considering that is like the point of the first film. There's not a single destroyed house you go into here. Not to be like, sound crazy, but like that's part of Twister. How in this film, when you have such a bigger budget, are you not even going to give us one broken down house that we go into? It's just all the CGI fest. You can't see the storms. You can't see the twisters half the time because it's just CGI nonsense all over the place. Even when there are cool practical sets. I was looking at some behind the scenes footage from a movie theater they go into later. It's just covered by CGI nonsense and you can't see anything. That really is what pissed me off here. I agree with you, Nick. I wasn't quite as emotional, I think, into this as you were from an experience. We're going through 7 stages of grief. But I sat there like depressed. Like I was so excited for this. And now I'll always look back on Twisters. And instead of being like, oh, I can't wait for that movie, that's going to be the movie of the summer, I'm going to look back and be like, yeah, that was a pretty not great average film. Should have been so much more. Should have been so much more. I don't know exactly where it went wrong. I don't know if it was in producing, directing. I don't want to say it's acting because I think the performances here, we'll get to a couple. I think specifically Glenn Powell is like flawless here. He's innocent as always. Yeah. But I don't know. It didn't do much for me. Jack?
I went into this after a double screening, so I went into this after the Deadpool Wolverine, which was just a nightmare in its own. Well, so I was looking forward to this, and I come from it probably in the middle ground of both of you. I couldn't stop watching the trailer for this because every single screening I went to, it was the TWIS that was like the big trailer. And I think when it first dropped with the Tom Cruise thing as well, there was a lot of that summer feeling of with like the first sort of slow blockbuster where it's not really going to be the big one, that's for the Deadpool, but it'll be the slow one where it'll gain some traction. And the first sort of report of it was like, oh, okay, it's going to be quite interesting. It's getting decent reviews, and I waited a while to watch it as well. I think I waited a week. My screening was packed, and my Deadpool one was packed as well. So that's a positive takeaway. That's probably it for me. I think this is a feature where the more I've talked about it, the more I dislike it. And I mentioned on Nick's review on Letterboxd, what's not been really reported about this is the production history of this film. Is that obviously this has been in development since like 1996 anyway. I'm a big fan of Twister as well, and I watched it after this because I needed to cleanse the palate. And again, I come from a different angle in the sense of I looked more at the production of this 20-year, 30-year cycle. It's been through. It was meant to be Twister's 3D in the early 2000s, then it went to maybe the 2010s. Then it went to Kosinski, like you said. He dropped out because of creative differences, and then the director jumps on board in this, who did Minari, which I've got no relationship whatsoever, so I'm taking this face value. And to me, from what starts as a passion project, quickly becomes into like a commercial obstacle for everyone involved. This to me feels like Universal and Warner Bros. Putting aspects together like a jigsaw and hoping you get a picture that looks clear. The production of this, to me, is absolutely, on occasion, disgraceful. Would it kill anyone to use a wide shot or just a long shot to just show the scale of this? Everything is so tight. Once you pick up on it in the cars, granted, we're going to be claustrophobic in the car, that's not a problem, but everything is set within those cars, mostly to get the claustrophobia of the surroundings. But we're not here for the claustrophobic atmosphere. We're here for the scale. We're here for the twisters, the tornadoes. It's never felt once. Some of the CGI work, like you mentioned, Carson, on Twitter, very disappointing that everything feels like it's not through a wind tunnel. It feels like it's CGI added. And then, like I said beforehand, if you look through the production history, this finished post in February. It released in July. and I can tell you right now that there's bits in here that don't look finished. So this would have been the second hour to get through for the deadline. And also, the director had, I know I've mentioned this to Nick as well, but I think it's important to mention this. This is not a long gestured project from the director. And I don't think he's worked since Minari, is that correct? So that's 2018. So let's say that's a 6-year gap.
That was 2020.
2020, sorry. Which doesn't change my point, but the director had to take 2 to 3 weeks off for exhaustion during production of this. That to me is a factor that's slightly worrying, and nobody seems to be wanting to be talking about that. I think that's quite telling of the production history. If you look at the IMDb photographs of this, not behind the scenes but on set, the lighting is different, the angles are different, especially when Katie O'Brien is getting, or maybe like Sacha Lane. We'll get to that later because I can't tell the fucking difference between the two of them. One in the theatre when they're playing Frankenstein and Glenn Powell's got hold of them. If you look at that in the final product and you look at that bit at the what feels like the first cut of the film when they've just got the promo, it's totally different. The lighting different, the colour grade different. So this has definitely gone through a lot of bumps and so on and so forth to get where it is. And for the most part, I think I give it like a slightly positive score on that alone. But this is just very boring, very hollow, very disappointing. It feels like every 10 minutes is the same thing again and again and again. That's my opening. But I would disagree with Carson about Anthony Ramos. I quite enjoyed him here. It's the only person who seems to have like a personality here or an arc. Everyone else just feels like we'll just pick from that. I mean, Glenn Powell's all surface, it's all persona, and he gets it through him. Excuse me, it gets him through the experience. But where's the parallel storyline between what he's doing? So he's just a hillbilly from Arkansas, but then she's had this emotional, traumatic journey. Like, let's see the parallel. Let's see them come together. And it's the same issue I had like the Quiet Place Part 1. I think we spoke about this a few weeks about giving a lot to Lupita Nyong'o and not giving enough to Joseph Quinn. Like, there seems to be sort of, we need a parallel line where they both meet. And here, I don't get that. I see a richness of personality and relationship, but I don't see any engagement. And I have to say, having watched the original 2 days later, the opening 10 minutes of the original frightens me to death. I watched that when I was very little, when I had it on video. It's absolutely frightening to, like, I mean, it's part Spielberg, part Jan de Bont, get rid of the father, you know, the father thing, but how it's executed, it's tormenting to watch that even now. There's no aspect of this where I can find anyone under the age of 15 watching this and going, that'll stay with me. And I think that's the problem here. It's not the intended audience is one thing, but the target audience, there's nothing here for them. So I'll go on to you, Carson, next, where you want to go with it. But for me, I'm surprised it's in the predicament it is. I'm quite glad it's made some money. But there's a very, I'll tell you one thing, a positive, just to end on one positive. I thought the soundtrack was very good. I didn't think the score was, but I thought the soundtrack was very good.
Well, I think one issue with Anthony Ramos is like everyone around him, and this is specifically kind of in the first half of the film, you are stuck with him and his crew. And his crew especially are just the most boring people in the world. But you don't just stick with them. You then see Glenn Powell and his crew who have personalities and have interests and have just character work, right? There's characters, I know their names. They have names compared to Anthony Ramos's crew. And it's like you're on vacation with like your parents and you see people like going having fun, but like, oh, I have to stick with my dad because he's here, he's on vacation with me, but I really want to go hang out with those people. And you just get to like dreading hanging out with these people because everyone on the other side is so much cooler and so much more fun. They're out there having a great movie, and every moment of excitement that comes in the first half of this film comes from you just leaving your perspective and going and hanging out with Glenn Powell as he's in the middle of a tornado shooting fireworks. That's fun. Just sitting there with like these people in suits, and to a point, that's kind of the point. And then they get into it in the second half, but that doesn't change the fact that like the viewing experience is boring because of it, right? Like even if something makes thematic or narrative sense, it doesn't make it better. And then you get into like, Nick kind of mentioned the politics of this film is super strange to me. The director, Peace and Love, and I don't think this necessarily actually comes from the director considering what he did with Minari, but he's like, I don't want to mention climate change, yet climate change is such a key factor of the film. It feels like in Top Gun Maverick, it misunderstood, like, we're not going to say what country we're going over to fight, but instead of being like, we're not going to mention the military. Like, you can't, that's not how that works, right? It's just a key misunderstanding. And I think that, like, not to just bring it back to Top Gun Maverick, because I think that's the most, like, when you talk about good blockbusters and blockbusters in general modernly, the easiest thing to do is say Top Gun Maverick, because it's the best example we have, I would say, of like a big budget blockbuster that gets it right. But truly, like, to have a film that doesn't just like not learn from the lessons of Top Gun Maverick, but it feels like at every point rejects it, really to me just felt so disappointing. Everything was here. Everything could have been here so simply. And it just like narratively is not interesting. I agree that Glenn Powell doesn't necessarily have the depth needed right now. Rewrite the script. There's no reason this film, cut him out, have her go back home for whatever reason, meet Glenn Powell. You can even just have the same narrative where she's like, oh, he's stupid, and then learns what's underneath or whatever, right? There's very simple narratives here that we've seen throughout the history of film dozens of times, hundreds of times that we could do here. And instead it doesn't choose to do that. It chooses a way more convoluted, way more boring plot, and then doesn't even have the balls, let's say, to have the venom to actually get into like climate change or big business. It feels to me very much so in some ways like Jurassic World Dominion. And granted, I think that film is worse than this, but where that film is trying to have like, we're not going to be a cool film. We're going to be this boring film, but we're going to have this depth, but they're never able to hit it on the head because they're trying to make it like, this has to be an appealing blockbuster for overseas audiences. Boom. It has to have these really cliched big moments because we can't make a good film. Boom. And like, it just feels like Twisters falls so much into that vein, which is so disappointing because it's just bad to watch. I couldn't watch this again. I would be bored out of my mind watching this again. I was bored out of my mind watching it the first time. If you're not going to have good action, you're not going to have good romance, you're not going to engage even with the romance. What are we doing here? Right? I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like a waste for sure. And again, like that's what bummed me out so much because the potential was there. I think the opening of this is strong. Like I was not expecting it. I knew nothing about the plot, so we're going full spoilers right for this. The fact that it opens with relatively famous actors or at least familiar faces just instantly die after 5 or 6 minutes of screen time. I was like, oh wow, okay, that's interesting ball. I didn't know that. I didn't expect it, so that actually surprised me. And to go into exploring the main character's trauma, to be honest, that's a problem that I had with, and I think like my main issue with this is the direction of the film. And it kind of goes back to his previous movie as well, where everything feels very surface level. They acknowledge specific elements that's almost becomes like critic proof in a way, or like proof like you cannot criticize it because it's like, well, but they say she has trauma, and so you see her in the first scene where she's like, oh no, I'm not able to do my job, but in the second scene she does because she is overcoming her trauma. It's like, yeah, we get it, but I like often I've been very lenient with blockbuster entertainment because let's say I'm very willing to just turn off my brain and be carried by the movie, but I'm not willing to turn off my heart during a freaking blockbuster, and this didn't hit me in any way emotionally. You're hearing Glenn Powell talk about his own childhood trauma, and it's like, oh, okay, he has trauma as well, I guess, and that's why he's chasing tornadoes to fight his fears. That's how you grow and become cool. And there's all these things of like it's predictable, incredibly predictable in a way that's not fun. Like you know exactly where this is going. You have the incredibly cliched Texan mogul or whatever he is with the big hat, oil hat. They're like, okay, he's gonna be, he's gonna be profiting off of this in some shady way because that's obviously what's happening, and that kind of goes nowhere. Literally, just never goes anywhere because they're not willing to tackle any of those themes in an interesting way. The Anthony Ramos is just kind of there, saying his lines. Good for him. Pat on the back. Keep on going. I was never, and even Daisy Edgar Jones, I was going to say Daisy Ridley for a second. Even Daisy Edgar Jones, like bless her, thankless role. She has to be mopey. She has to be a little bit sad and like trying to recover. She never gets a chance to have some sass. I think that could have worked if she had a little bit more personality, because they have hints of that, where she's misleading Glenn Powell's crew to go like in different directions. Meanwhile, she's at one with the weather. She knows where the tornadoes are going and moving around. But again, it all kind of just ends in a very bland set piece, and just all of it, like The sound design is perfect. Watching this movie in IMAX definitely helped, making me feel like I was in those scenes, but I never really felt the danger and the tactile nature of it that was present in the original. Like you said, Carson, I completely agree. The set pieces are bad, but not bad in like a, I don't know, Joss Whedon's Justice League way or whatever. It's like floaty and there's no weight. No, no, no. It's bad because there's nothing that stands out in them. All of the tornado things are just like, holy shit, there's a tornado. Grab onto something. Random pedestrian gets sucked up, and that's it. Meanwhile, even the cinema scene, I think that's the moment when I realized I wasn't liking this movie in the cinema, was the theater scene with Frankenstein. Because you think of the original, and it's one of very few direct references that they have in the homages. In the original, you have The Shining that's playing at a drive-in theater during the iconic scene of Nicholson hacking the door down, and you have the cars coming in, and there's the light just like exploding inside of the twister, and it looks great. And in here, I was waiting for the moment where they actually use Frankenstein. Just like doing the "It's alive." It's going like we're going to see Dr. Frankenstein reflected inside the twister. And it's like, no, no, no. Just the screen floats away. Just get sucked up as well. That's emblematic of the entire film for me. It's leading up to something that has potential, and they do the bare minimum with it. It's just like, okay, I guess.
This is where it comes down on an issue of screenplay for me. This film thinks it's far smarter than it is. If you break it down, it's actually quite embarrassing. So, first and foremost, let's talk about the opening, about it doing the psycho technique, which is killing off what allegedly believes to be major characters to get the audience immersed. If it's not through emotional engagement, it's through at least an attachment and engagement to, oh my God, we don't know what's going to happen here. That might work if you don't get rid of two characters that seemingly might be quite interesting and replace them with nothingness, which is just corporate bore, which Carson said earlier. That's not going to work on a principle level of us engaging with what feels like rebels almost, a ragtag group, and then wanting to spend time in an office with the Empire. That doesn't really engage with an audience who want to want to be on this ragtag group of storm chasers, which the first film perfectly resembled, in that you've got Philip Seymour Hoffman, you've got all sorts of these people who are very strange, very deranged, but have idiosyncrasies that are unique to themselves. Everyone is distinctively different, but they're all the same pact, which then goes back to Glenn Powell's posse, let's say, which, yep, I get that, but we'll get to that later. So that's number one, the biggest error here. The second error is there's no immersion here with exposition. So when you watch the first film, and this not to get on the master's degree here, I know that there'll be jokes about, but we have to be sort of analytical here because this is going to really piss me off, this film. And I can just see the review just going down and down and down. I've already published it in purposely for this on Letterboxd. But let's talk about that. So Bill Paxton's girlfriend in the first film is Miss Exposition. She's naive, she's ignorant to the fact. Nothing wrong with that, but what it does is it creates a character that can be a opening for the audience. So they describe to her, and then we get it described, but it feels natural because she doesn't know what's going on. She gets educated on the matters like we do. So it feels like this natural exposition, but it has to go through that because there's Dorothy, there's what these people do, there's how they do it, where they're going, EV5s, all sorts of stuff like that. But it works because it feels like this natural education on the matter. It isn't here in this because Daisy Edgar Jones is the Oracle, and Glenn Powell is like, walking Jesus, and they both can they get to they do the Presser X, they get onto the mine, and they can find the tornado in Oklahoma. There's very little here where it opens us up to become immersed. Now you could argue, well, Jack, this is a sequel to Twister. You don't need to sort of know that. That's error number 3, my friend, because this is a standalone remake. This is not a sequel. This is Twisters in name. This is a new, different type of batch of characters in what feels like the same world but different. It feels like a Cabin Fever 3 thing where you get like, yeah, we've seen the first Cabin Fever. Oh, let's say more easy. This feels like the Force Awakens. It's like it feels like a continuation of New Hope, but it's different. And I think you can separate them both, which is good for any other audience. But when you come to exposition of the narrative, you've got major issues to sort of engage people. And there's a Dorothy reference there, and there's other references here, and it rhymed like the George Lucas thing. But we'll get away from that. But the problem is that you don't have this natural emotional immersion to the feature, because everyone's quite smart, and therefore everybody knows their things, everybody knows their stuff. They know what they're going to do. They just don't know how to process it. That's the only natural emotional attachment you have to this film, which is quite strange, because you get the Daisy Edgar Jones and you get the Glenn Powell relationship, and that's where that blossoms in the fact that she's dealing with the trauma. I don't know what he's doing to help that, but she's ultimately trying to figure out a trauma, and she understands that if she solves this problem, she can feel her guilt. That's all well and good, but you've also got an atmosphere for 2 hours where you're getting told everything, and I think you by the end of it, not on a Tenet explanation or an Interstellar sort of thing, where it becomes like, am I stupid? Like, why am I being presented as the numpty in this scenario? Like, I should be immersed within this. And there's a lot of technological babble about the drones and stuff and EV5s. It's just never explained very well. And I think that's all well and good for a seasoned film reviewer, like all three of us are. Well, 2.5, because one of us is quite a well-renowned filmmaker in his own right. But for an average audience, I think I have to admit, I'm not saying they're stupid, but I do think there's a natural engagement where people want to be immersed in a factor of being not educated, the wrong word, but slowly resounded into it. But let's go back on to what you said about the theatre, right? That to me is gold. The Frankenstein, it's alive, and it breaks through, and we get the tornado, right? That feels like it writes itself. So the question is, why is it not presented in the film as such? In the advertisement, why is Anthony Ramos's quote about this theatre's not big enough for what's coming? Why are they not in the trailers? And the answer for me is that this is not a passion project. This is a commercial vehicle. And I don't think there's passion in going into this to fully fledge it out to a degree where, like, I think this needs to work for the feature rather than it starts at 01 and it ends at 202, and that's it. That's all we need to present on screen. And I don't think there's a projection of emotional attachment with I don't want to say the director, but I think if you've got a screenwriter like Joseph Kosinski, who I don't think is a terrific screenwriter in his own right, I think he's a visual director. That's your problem. Because you've got a visual director knowing that I can write limited amount of screenplay, but I can project my mindset and visualize it. Getting someone to do that job with a limited screenplay is just going to produce a limited screenplay. And that ultimately is the issue here presented, because there's just absolutely no passion, and I don't think that is a condescending term. I don't sort of go at the director in a personal route, but I think as a blockbuster like this, and also I think to get, I'll move on very quickly after this, but I think that the emotional attachment with Bill Paxton here is the one that rubs me the wrong way, because this is a person for a good 17, 18 years after Twister wanted to get this made, couldn't get it made, and even after directing A Frailty, and even wanted to sort of try and make it himself, people said no, but it went through multiple drafts. So for it eventually to come out, and granted it's not got a massive emotional attachment with an audience, but it feels like there's a lack of respect for the material. And I think that's probably me projecting a little bit on that, but I still think that remains to be quite cute. I think that's right. So I go back again to just the woeful screenplay. It really is like dire on occasion.
I mean, you also have to, like, number one, Lee Isaac Chung, let's also be clear, has not made a blockbuster ever. Minari is a very small scale, so there's also just inexperience in learning, especially with CGI and everything, how that all works. But I don't think you're wrong at all when you say that there is a... I think if there's one lesson I learned going into Twisters, it was that people really love Twister. Like, when you talk about like a respect for the original, the fan base out there, I don't think Twister is something that's often talked about culturally, but everyone I talked to was like, I cannot wait for Twisters. The original is a banger. This is like something that like I grew up with. I love this. Like, I think there's a lot of fandom for Twister, a lot of love for that film in general. So I do think when you go into something like this, there is a lot of people who have expectations on what that is going to be. So I think you're absolutely on track. I ought to give yourself a little bit more credit with that read on, like, I think people are going to go into this and have gone onto this expecting something closer to the original with love for that original, and then we're disappointed because they didn't get that. I think that's absolutely something we've seen. I also want to appreciate that Nick's outside window is literally just like a twister and lightning right now. Like, I hope that's framed correctly on the actual video, because
it's happening, right? Like in the video it looks way lighter than it actually is. This is insane. It's basically like pitch black darkness in here, and it should be bright light. So
Do you have a psychic ability where you can tell me how big it is? Is that
No.
a 5? Is that a 4?
I don't know. What's
Which is also crazy. I don't think we mentioned, and I'm happy someone mentioned it, because I completely like blinked out of my mind that was a thing, where literally she will hold up a dandelion and like look at the sky and be like, no, that's the one. It's crazy. We're not like, that's unbelievable.
She's that good, Carson.
They both have it though.
Smart.
They both have it also. Glenn Powell's not as strong, but they both have it.
I must admit that this goes back to my like visual realization of the screenplay, because it's done a little bit later, where on the wheat fields the wind changes. She notices that. That's a great visual bit of key, where we don't have it told to us, but like we sort of know something's happened, and she's sort of clued up to that. That is Joseph Kosinski. But the other one, I don't know what that is. I think that to me is just like an idea of a screenplay, like, oh, we'll just get from A to B, and I think it comes quite condescending. I think the only thing that doesn't make this, like you said, Carson, like splitting hairs and people like revolting in the chairs, is that if it tried to patronize the audience even further and like added more scientific endeavor, or was just like stupid to a point of like rejection, those sequences would generally be appalling. But because it's not as stupid as it probably should be, it gets away with it. But I go back to this screenplay and I'm like, if anyone looks at the cast list, just number the support cast here. It must be 10, 12 characters and actors. Why are they not condensed? They're all visually somewhat unique, especially Glenn Powell's posse. But other than that, there's just no identity. There's no individual uniqueness. So we become sort of attached to the two key notes, which is Powell and Edgar Jones. But bar that, to me, I was generally lost. I noticed Sacha Lane because I've got somewhat a relationship with the Andrea Arnold film with Shia LaBeouf. I can't remember what American something.
American Honey.
Yeah, whatever about I've a deep rooted relationship with that, but we'll move on. And Cow, but then you go to like after that, like Katie O'Brien's in this, and it took me an hour and 40 minutes to realize who that was, because obviously I know that they look different to Love Lies Bleeding, but it took me an hour and 40 minutes. Okay, I have no idea who that is, because there's just no individualism, and there's probably a lot here where you can look at. In the next 10 years, we'll look back on it in the same way that we looked at Twister, like Philip Seymour Hoffman and stuff like that, and you'll see individual people who will go on to do bigger and brighter stuff.
Oh my God, it's Anthony Ramos.
but even then, it's like I just don't know what everyone's like. So the guy who's cast as Superman here, right? David Sauntsworth, something like that. I can't remember his name. There's like two moments in this film where you feel like, oh, there's some character there. After that, he's just a corporate lacquer. He's an individual with screen presence that just is one note, and I think that comes down to everything else. A good screenwriter here can collectively meld a lot of these characters together, put them into one, and make it a lot more dynamic. I think that's one thing where you can probably realize that that's Anthony Ramos's character, because if you look at a first draft here and you take the three characters who were killed in the opening, I think all of them in a second draft all go to him. Everything. I think you've got the boyfriend thing that's strange. You've got the best friend that's strange. You've got the corporate verse. The capitalist verse, like rebel sort of thing. I think it all becomes an amalgamation in that character. And ironically enough, for me, that's probably the most depth of someone who has an arc anyway, regardless. So again, I from someone who was like being within the medium who's written screenplays, who's done masterclasses, presented screenplays and stuff like that, and someone who is a film critic, those two things come really well together to sort of analyze these things. And Nick, you probably be even more beneficial, but yourself, like, this is 2 hours and 2 minutes, and every 15 minutes we feel like we're on a projection where we're going back. We're doing the same thing, but yeah, the running time is progressing. But we feel like we're stagnating as an audience because we're watching the same thing over and over and over again. And how the visualization, especially when we go to the diner, which again is like the callback to the hotel. Sorry, we go back to the motel, and it's like they go into the swimming pool. It just feels like a constant callback to what was better in 1996. But these are not callbacks in a homage. These are callbacks because it needs to rest on the laurels of other products. Because remember they did that. Remember they did this, and it's an issue that I feel like is just like strangely apparent in all these sequels, all these legacy sequels. And there's very few, bar some auteurs, that go into this and be like, I want to deconstruct that, or I want to make something feel the same, but do it in a different sort of procedural way where we question something if it's thematic, tone, or we question something even on a visual sense. This is just by the book, by the guns. And it's so disappointing on multiple occasions to think about this. Like, I don't know. I'll move on because I just can see myself getting riled up.
You guys get the sense that they're holding back in some ways for a sequel? I just kept feeling like they were like, I really think they're planning for another one.
What, like
I
in character, you mean?
In character, and I mean, pretty much every single way. I feel like I got the sense, especially later on, like, okay, you're not giving us a lot of time with like Glenn Powell's group, let's say, because you want that to be something for the sequel. Like, I just kept getting sequel vibe. Like, we want to franchise this.
That door's definitely open. Yeah, it feels very apparent. But the one thing that it just feels very much, what are we going for? Like, we're just going to see the same thing, aren't we? Because if you think about it, let's have a look. I don't mean to cut Nick off or anything like that, but let's just look at the context of the screenplay here, right? And this, again, fucking the audience here is like wonderfully, like Jack's analysing every detail. But let's look at the narrative here, and we speak about like what's evolved since 1996 here. Because I remember reading Joseph Kosinski said that we won't go and speak to Joe. We won't find Bill Paxton's character. We won't find Philip Seymour Hoffman. They're out in that world, but they're still chasing. We're following some other people here. And that's all well and good. That's the get out of jail free card. But if you look at the progression from 1996 to this, and I'm not talking about the visuals, I'm not talking about the cinematic quality, I'm talking about the context of the narrative. What has changed? Because they're fighting against a guy who's corporate in Cary Elwes, and they're doing the same here. And then they've got a substance that they're trying to detonate with in the first one is that, well, we can find that, you know, if we put these things, and we can find like when they start tornadoes, so we can have a warning system. And then this one is that we can go from 3 minutes to a 15-minute warning. But what's the natural progression that we've seen? If you watch these back to back, you're ultimately watching a sequel, but you're actually watching just a remake. There is absolutely no progression. And I think anyone, again, to your point, Carson, about those fans of Twister reject this on principle because we haven't gone anywhere. We're not in the same world to a point where we're following the same story. We're not evolving with any characters. There's no progression. There's no thematic evolution. The fact that we're not discussing where these tornadoes are coming from, because it's mentioned multiple times, like, oh, there's bad tornado season this year, that they're coming up from everywhere. We need to stop this. But there's no comment about climate change, which ironically, I don't know if anyone noticed, but if you watch the trailer, if you watch the credits, it never says it's carbon neutral either. So that's probably a massive warning why this was never mentioned. Because how could it be? How could this production be carbon neutral with a CGI? But again, it's one of those approaches where it's a big film, and that's it. It's big on scale, and even then, it's shot like shit. It really is. It's terrible, and on multiple occasions, it's horrendously captured.
Couldn't you say, I mean, I think you gotta kind of ignore the original, but like, could you imagine another film? It's the old ones, old people from the original mixed with this to fight, you know, the biggest tornado. And then you really get into because even the corporate story just dies. It's just like a tornado. It just vanishes into thin air without really any follow through or anything. Like, for me, I just feel like they're begging, and I don't think it's gonna be good, but like, if we're gonna get Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire or whatever it was called, like, we can definitely get Twisters too. More Twisters. You know, I don't know what you title it, but
Twisters
for me, that's
with
what
a 3 in the E. Twisters.
No, that would be way cooler than whatever they do, Nick. That would be the best thing ever. But like, even when how they positioned this film, they didn't like throw this movie in January. Like, they clearly expected this to be a hit financially, and it made good money, right? I think they expected this to do something, and in a film that is entirely corporately designed and made. I don't see how in the modern blockbuster system, we're not quite there yet on some of our blockbusters, we'll get there, but I don't know how they don't position this and then be like, we got to make more. Even Top Gun 3 they're making, right? So like, we're still in this franchise system. I just feel for me, like they were trying to hold things back, even like the kiss at the end, to be like, oh, that's a moment we can put in the next one. I don't know.
I think it's just like poor filmmaking. I wish I could be on the side of just like finding reasons as to why it's like this, and I'd love to, but it just felt like, man, just weak. And I do think, even going back to what you were saying, Jack, with the like Joseph Kosinski story, when I mentioned the actual screenwriter Mark Smith, he's made like The Revenant and Overlord, two movies that I like. But you know, like there's not award-winning screenplays. He's made also Midnight Sky and Vacancy, you know, so it's not like the best resume. But it goes to show that it's very different movies that are made and directed in very different ways. And I always thought, like, I always considered and put a lot of thoughts on like, oh, the screenplay and screenwriter are very important, that they do things. But then, like, listening to a lot of behind the scenes and documentaries about filmmaking, there's a lot of times when they're actually shooting or prepping the film, they go in different directions from the screenplay. I think like one of the ones that I really liked was the John Wick Chapter 3 behind the scenes, where the director was talking about like, yeah, the screenplay was like, they're going to fight in a big warehouse, and we thought, why not have horses and it's a stable in New York because they're there, and just like changing things on a dime. The screenplay said whatever generic nonsense, just they fight somewhere, but the actual director and the people involved elevated it somehow. And in here, it feels like the opposite. It really does feel like the director didn't really elevate it, even with choices that I understand, like you said in the beginning as well. Yeah, it's all grounded. Like you're close to the people and you're feeling the struggle of the tornadoes, but you never really get a good, like, nice little wide shot, except for the fire tornado that instantly dies. I was getting pumped up for that. Like, it happens so many times. Everything is in service of moving forward the most boring characters possible. I was very upset. Like, that's why we get the corporate thing. It's not for any actual criticism of corporations and moguls and people profiting of others' lives. It's because Anthony Ramos has to get back with the main group and join them. Because right after that, they're like, it's done, peace out, you know, we never see them again. We don't know what happens. They're doing their experiments or not. But Anthony Ramos, you know, he has a soul still. He's doing the right thing. Like, it's so... and that pained me so much with the side characters. I completely agree with what you two are saying, because it's a waste. We don't need that many side characters, and all of them have way more energy than anyone else in the room. I even really like, I forgot the actor's name, like the journalist character. I think he had an interesting personality. He wasn't just this scaredy cat. I was like, okay, you know, he's a bit of a swell little British guy to have in the room. Sasha Lane, she's the drone person. You have Katie O'Brien, who drives the big truck, and there's the other guy who drives the other truck, and you know, there's a very excited cameraman. Like, all those elements, they do nothing with them. There's not one moment where they do something interesting with drones. There's no exciting, like, running, driving, chasing scene. There's no moment where they actually use these characters, even to just have their little throwaway bit. You watch the original, everyone in the side cast, no matter how large or small their name was, gets that little moment. In this film, they don't. They really don't. And it's man, like, and you get to the actual, like, central relationship between the two leads that is clearly being set up to be romantic in nature, but it's so sexless throughout. There's no genuine chemistry. It literally feels like, you know, two people coming from two different sides finding a middle ground. And, you know, in a way, I was kind of upset that it's like, oh, there's no kiss at the end. But then when you think about it, it's like, well, does it really feel earned? You know, they build it up in an incredibly crazy way where he's actually, you know, he's blocking the car at the airport and he's running for her.
He drills into the cement or whatever. Hell yeah.
You have Paul Scheer screaming at him. Nice little cameo. It's like, okay, but what? But I don't know. What were you going to say, Jack?
I'm gonna sound quite patronizing here. I'm quite condescending, but just please stay with me. From from the last 30 to 40, 50 years, right? I mean, even probably from the dawn of cinema, actually, I'll go that far. I think there's two different types of filmmakers. There's the independent, and then there's a visionary, and it's usually the one in between who goes on to and makes dents within the canon, the zeitgeist. And we've mentioned this throughout the blockbuster season on ClapperCast as well. And every time we do gems, there's always a visionary on there who gets the one between the two. And I think they're doing the Spike Lee season. That's a director who gets the two things bang on right. Tarantino, the Wachowskis. It'd be an era here of like the 80s and 90s as well. But you go back to Fritz Lang, Hitchcock. There are visionaries who can meld independent type filmmaking with a visionary visual flair. Often than not, because of the restrictions now of the independent market and independent financing, and because it's all big budget stuff, there's a lack of variable and prospect of the independent becoming the visionary. And I think from the last 15 to 20 years now, you see that jump not working. Very few directors are able to do it. I think if you look at the likes of, if you take into consideration Joseph Kosinski, I think that's prime. Joseph Kosinski's directorial debut was Tron Legacy. That is unheard of. Granted, that's almost 14 years ago now. But that's unheard of. To make a budget that, and it bombed anywhere, or at least it didn't make enough money back to get the other whatever we're going to get with Jared Leto in the next few years. God forbid us all. But you've got directors now who are making that jump at an astronomical rate, where I don't think people find their feet. I think when you look at filmmakers, I think you have to make Bound to make The Matrix. I think you have to make Reservoir Dogs to make Inglourious Bastards, Once Upon in Hollywood, even the Kill Bills, even Jackie Brown. I think you've got to be the filmmaker who makes Lifeboat and then makes Vertigo. I think it's very important on a journey to evolve and not cut corners in life. But because there's a lack of the industry able to give certain platforms to directors, we go from one thing and we jump. And the last one that reminds me of this is Colin Trevorrow with is it Safety Not Guaranteed and Jurassic World?
Yeah.
I think when you look at the two, I'm not saying Colin Trevorrow's not a competent director. You don't get to make those films if you're not competent. But it's also understandable to understand. Sorry, it's understandable to resign yourself to knowing that step might be one step too far. David Lynch, your hero, Nick, is one who's accepted that. He accepted it when he made Return of the Jedi, that he couldn't do it because it's a George Lucas thing, and he also accepted it after Dune came out in '84. He cannot make that jump. So did he resign himself to go sit like a Howard Hughes and count his turds? No, he went to go make projects he wanted to make. And I think when you look at the directors now, there's not the fallback, which I think is slightly unfair as well. There's not that fallback to be like, oh my god, they're shit now. Granted, Colin Trevorrow made the Book of Henry, and that's unforgivable in its own right. We'll do that. We'll get there another day. But I just think that when you look at Safety Not Guaranteed, you look at independent filmmaker there who looks like he's got a vision, who understands his thematic. Then you watch Jurassic World, and the two of them are such dissonance because one's a corporate product. And I think another director who is, and then you get the other just the visionaries who can't work with a screenplay. And the first one there is J.J. Abrams. Can't do it. Can't work on a screenplay he writes, and he has to, and because of that, he rests on other homages and odes. Like I said beforehand, this film here is at the structure between the two. It can't rest on homages and odes because there's nothing much there to rest on because this is the same thing. But also, it's such a massive jump for its director working on a screenplay that they haven't written. I just think that this is sort of set up to fail in a way. I do think it's sort of unfortunate. That being said, I think that's looking at the deeper surface. I think if you look at the surface level, this is what it is. I mean, I go back to my opening, reading about the production history, reading about who's writing this, who's directing it. There are sort of things where it writes itself in the canon, and this is exactly it. This is nothing what I expected it to be. Sorry, this is exactly what I expected it to be. A corporate commercial venture for its director to go from the independent market to more of the blockbuster, at least to be able to go to meetings and be like, well, I made you money. So you can give me $15 million or $50 million now, whatever the independent market is, and I'll make my own film. I think that's where we're at. I don't know where I land on that on a personal thing. I think you've got to make those financial decisions in order to recoup in the next 5, 6, 7 years. I think you've got to, you've got to have a dog and bark. I think if you want the old Yorkshire saying, but I think where does that then stop and be like, right, I need to step away from this here, and I'm best where I make these type of films. And I think it goes one of two ways. It either goes the Lynch way, like you said. I know I'm not talking about David Lynch as a visionary director and like his aesthetic. I'm just talking about someone who doesn't work in certain circles. You either work like him and you say, it's not for me. I think I'll go back and make my own stuff and it'll be mine. Or you do the George Lucas thing where you can't make any independent thing ever again because you've got this big thing. You just want to make the commercial hits. And what's more disappointing is I bet if I go watch Manara, I'd probably enjoy it. But would I see much of a visual language between that and this without seeing Manara? Even I can say that no, I don't think we would see anything. So when you say about a sequel to this, it would have to uproot all of its sort of own body, shock itself into having a heartbeat, and then miraculously try and bring in its third characters. And we've done that. You said a Colin Trevorrow film itself, Jurassic World Dominion, and what is it? It's just I've seen the theatrical cut.
I think there's a certain quote in Jurassic Park that describes what it is. Certain, I don't know. You can put it together. Pile of shit. You're the Chloe Zhao erasure for jumping from Nomadland.
Oh my
to
god!
Eternals.
I completely sorry. Oh my god! And where stands of that film? We've got those,
best picture frontrunner Eternals.
Yeah.
So
our Twitters have been on the download for a while because we haven't had anything to post because we've got Stan accounts on Twitter. I forgot about that. That is a prime great example of going for something and it not working. Maybe I don't want to say that film should be a moral compass and you should make a $200 million blockbuster and you should be like, well, I made the money and it didn't ruin my career. I think that there's also people's livelihoods at stake of being able to make a film again, but also it shouldn't be a trivial thing with $200 million. And I think sometimes Hollywood wants to sort of do that. This shouldn't be a risk. This should feel like to me like very easy to make. I know that sounds sort of like disingenuous and maybe slightly ignorant to the fact, but this shouldn't be as poor as it is. This should not be as passive and hollow as it is because of watching the Jan de Bont film. And going to Jan de Bont is his own DP on occasion. He did Basic Instinct and stuff like that. And he did a lot of Paul Verhoeven's earlier stuff. I'm not too sure if he did Total Recall. I'm not too sure, but obviously with Speed and then Twister and then Tomb Raider: Cradle of Life. But we'll get so that's another day. But at least you've got a visualization, and I think also as well. This is where I'll end it. I'll move on. We talk a lot about now in CGI about the Captain America New World trailer and how the CGI doesn't look right, and it gets, like you said, Nick, things get changed very early on, but also very late on. I think case in point, Rise of Skywalker as well. I think there's a lot of blockbusters where they get cold feet and they just change stuff for the sake of reactionary tabloid stuff. I also think that VFX are things that 20 years ago they were the first thing to be done. And now they're the last thing to be done. And I think that tells because there's not enough progress where they're able to climatize to the image. And not to get very nerdy here, but digital effects have a very difficult time on 35mm grain. This is shot on 35mm grain, which I think is commendable to shoot this blockbuster on film, but the two don't meld very well. And I think on multiple occasions here, it feels like the CGI or the VFX are an afterthought about how we're going to make this look as big as it is. And that's primarily the issue here. The first thought is getting the actors to say their lines, which is okay, that's fair enough. But the real last thing is that, well, how do we make this look bigger and better and brighter and louder? And let's get some sparks here, let's get some noise here. And usually that's how post works. Principal photography, it's pre-production, principal photographer, and then post. That's how a film is made for anyone out there. That's how you sound condescending, but ultimately that's the principal factor of how you go through this. But post it should be a revitalization of everything coming together. It shouldn't just be a CGI thing where let's create that, let's create this. And to me, watching the feature, it feels like post was the primary thing of getting it right. And ironically enough, waiting so long in pre-viz, there's just no iconography here. There's no screen presence. I don't know if anyone. I know we're joking about Nick here, but I'll tell a true story here. A couple of years ago, I think it was about 2016, 2015. I was in Chicago in America, right? I'm sure there's a Chicago in Finland, but this one was in America. And I remember sitting in the front room watching. I must have been watching a movie. It could have been Climax, actually. It could have been 2018. It could have been, or it could have been the first Conjuring, when the Conjuring 2 came out, 2016, maybe, I don't know, around that time. And all of a sudden, this beep goes on, all the TV shows. If anyone out there, I'm from England, so this doesn't happen. Very much a US thing. And everything goes off, and it's a beep, 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 tornado warning. And having not seen that before, it's quite, squeaky bum time, Babby's arm crawls out, I mean, it's quite frightening. And I remember my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, I have to mention every time because she listens to this. She was like, "You need to go to the window." And I was like, "I'm not going to the fucking window." She's like, "Just listen to the window, right?" And I remember going to the window, and this is a neighborhood in Chicago, and it's pitch black outside. It's like 9 o'clock at night, and all of a sudden, the sky goes green. I've never seen that in my life, and there is I don't believe in the Lord above, but there's a moment in that time where you think, "Oh, this is going to be difficult," and the noises wouldn't stop. And I've got it on my phone. I'll have to show you two after. I'll have to find it. And there's a bang of lightning, and outside it hits a tree, and the tree gets electrocuted and cracks in half and falls in the middle of the road. And it all happened within 10 minutes. And there are goosebumps, and then there's an out of body experience, and it's like 4DX. It wasn't an IMAX. It was monumentally frightening. And when I watch something like this, not that I'm a tornado chaser, but there has to be some remembrance or resemblance, should I say, of feeling texture, feeling flair, and feeling a richness of the surroundings. And I think every time you get to the point where it starts to rain, you don't feel it. You don't feel the hails or the hail. You don't feel the lightning. And then when you get to the fire tornado, you see spectacle, but you don't feel the inner danger and the scenario of, if we breathe here, our insides are going to burn. And it's very much a feature where it can't understand its own climatic substance. It can't understand its procedural, visceral embodiment. And by the principal factor of a disaster feature not getting that, I have to say it's DOA. I think that's dead on arrival. If you can't understand its principle of what it's trying to engulf here, but being a disaster feature, what are we here for? And the answer is secondhand embarrassment, boring character study. I don't really care that they kiss at the end. I'm just glad it was over. The fact that I hope he gets a hefty fine by the Oklahoma City Council for what he's done there. I don't even know. I don't even know what his name is in this. I can't remember his name.
Glenn Powell.
Yeah, Glenn. Yeah. But there's just such a lack of characters, such a lack of texture. It's kind of frightening, and I think we'll have this conversation multiple times going forward. I think I'm glad I wasn't here on last week when you went to go watch a Marvel movie. One of those. I don't know if you've seen one of those, but that's frightening to me. I think we're getting this was like the stake in the heart for me. We always talk about this. It's not new. We're doing a series about it. Shit, we've had episodes where we've gone, "This is great." The next 20 years weren't so much, and I think we're there now. We're actually talking about that in real time. So if there's a sequel, I'd like to see a visionary. I'd like to see another independent director, perhaps, who wants to make the jump. I like that, but I would it needs to be written directed, I think, as well.
I think to end this off, we've been quite negative today, and I think it's been justified, right? I don't think this film was good. Jack, you might need to go edit your review. You posted
Don't bring that up
here.
Yeah.
I think let's just go around in a circle and say just at least one thing that is not Glenn Powell that we like about the film. Let's just give one positive to end this off on, because it's been quite negative. I will start to let you guys have a moment to think. I quite like the rodeo scene. I think that is the start of the second part of the film. That is much better than the first. Still not great, but I like the rodeo scene. I like Glenn Powell's chemistry with everyone in that scene. I liked it. I liked it a lot. Nick, what is a positive you have?
I like the scene. I think it was before the rodeo scene, if I'm not mistaken. It's after the first tornado, where the group of Glen Powell is just like handing out food and water to people as it were distraught. It's just a moment of humanity, just a moment of solidarity. I'm trying to stay positive. I'm thinking of
You're
negatives
such
to
a
add, but I'm
romantic.
like, I like that part. He goes
Such a
chasing for the
romantic.
dog, and it's very cliched, but it kind
Yeah.
of worked. Where it's like, oh, those guys, they're YouTubers. They're only doing this for the fame and the money. And then it's like, no, they're actually trying to do something more with this platform and actually use what they get to help people in need. And I thought that's nice to see. And that's when Katie, whatever Daisy's character is named, starts like, maybe they're not so bad after all. She starts changing a little bit.
I think that's the scene where they go like, it's getting worse and worse every year. And they're like, why? And then they just don't have an answer because they can't say
Speed
climate
tower,
change.
isn't it?
Right. Jack, what's a positive that you have?
I'm gonna quite struggle here. With being all serious, I was gonna choose a rodeo scene just because I think it's like the only character where you pause and reflect. And then even then, it's sort of like, oh, okay, but like you used to be like a bull rider, now you're a meteorologist. Like, is that meant to be compelling to me? Like, that's quite a career shift. I'd like to know more. Or you were kicked in the head. Right. Okay. Anyway, one thing I'll do. I have a shirt that's eerily similar to Glenn Powell's. I was gonna wear it, but it was so warm in this room that I just can't. And it's so big. I usually wear it for work. So that's one. That's 1.5. Another one I play is Kiernan Shipka. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I think she's outstanding. I think she's outstanding at long legs. I think she's outstanding in Febro, the Blackcoat's daughter. I think she's an exceptional actress. I think she's brilliant. And she's just taken too soon. It's just criminal. This film, the more I think of it, I actually think this film feature is criminal. Like, she's like at least got personality when she's on screen. I know it's a bit forced and it's a bit more. Remember, these people are friends. They're friends. They know each other inside out. They're friends, and it's like so well and truly forced on screen. Like everyone's on that.
Yeah.
No one does that. Like no one's like that. Like it's all like Disneyfied, and then when they're in the car, and then everything goes again. There's only sort of moment where you get a little bit of like intensity to the proceedings where everything goes like a bit quiet, and we get the sequence outside, and they run out, and she's taken over. But it's done very poorly. I think the scene blocking is very poor. I think the visualization of everything there is poor. But I'd say again, I'm going negative, so I'll go back. Glenn Powell's shirt and the rodeo. I'll give the rodeo one, but Kiernan Shipka was like a really. I didn't even know she was in this. So it was quite cool to see that, and the idea was me to be compelled that she was going to disappear and she was going to be in this for a while. It filled my heart and then broke it momentarily afterwards. So
it was good casting, even with the guy from Good Luck to You, Leo Grande. I was like, oh, it's that guy. Just like moments like that. It works.
Absolutely. Well,
He's not so
didn't he turn out to be an asshole?
Well, yeah, sure, I guess.
He got stuff got revealed from his likes like the week before they took out likes, and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, buddy. If you waited 1 week, it would have been fine. But alas.
Damn.
Well, if you want to see Twisters, you can see it in theaters. I think that's going to do it for our glowing positive review. Let's get to our wrap or our question of the week, which is asking, what is your favorite disaster film? Jack, what disaster stood out to you on the big screen?
So for me, I thought this question is the hardest one you've done because there's a lot of them and not a lot of them are very good, but they're very, very iconic. So I tried to go through stuff because you could go for like The Road and the Titanic and stuff, and you go like the Roland Emmerich or just Roland Emmerich is just one in his own right. And then I know someone will go Melancholia because he's like that. But I had a look and I was going through like Contagion's quite good, but I was like it's probably too close to home. So I went for 3. But I'm gonna give my reason. The first one where I generally have like secondhand drama is Armageddon, the Michael Bay masterpiece with Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck. That ending like scarred me for quite a while. Quite fucking broke my heart. And the other 2 are video classics here. Video VHS classics in my house when I was little. The first one is Daylight with Sylvester Stallone. Go watch that. A very early performance of Viggo Mortensen, which I never realised. It's directed by a piece of shit. I'm not going to say his name, but Daylight is I've had a drink for anyone out there who's with libel, but Daylight's a classic. Such a late 90s which is a very strange. If anyone's not seen it, it's Sylvester Stallone who is he's like I don't know what he is actually. I don't know what he does in the film, but there's an accident under a like a bypass underground outside New York that like something blows up and then the water from the actual river starts to coming to this and there's loads of people and then they have to save them and Viggo Mortensen's like a rock climber who tries to help them and stuff. But that's a classic. You are a Panerai watching that film, which anyone for just a thing there. That's a really interesting product placement that changed film because he owns shares in that. Now you've got to disclose it. But the number one, and I recommend people go watch this, and nobody remembers it. I wanted to say the director's voice is Mikhail Salomon, and no one knows what this is. It's the Morgan Freeman. Has anyone got it yet? Christian Slater, Minnie Driver, Randy Quaid acted Hard Rain. Right?
Never heard of this. Yeah. I don't think I've ever heard of this.
It is amazing, right? It's amazing. It's actually remade by that piece of shit who made Daylight with a film with Toby Kebbell. I can't remember what that's called, but Hurricane Heist. That's the unofficial remake.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's got but we'll leave that for another day because the what you reap is what you sow. But Hard Rain is it casts Ed Asner and Christian Slater, sorry, who are like a bail bondsman who take money from banks and stuff, like depositories like that. And there's a town in the middle of America that's flooded, and they go through it and they have to pick something up. But then Morgan Freeman and a band of characters decide to rob them. And then the sheriff, Randy Quaid, before he went, to the other side, he plays a sheriff and everything's flooded. So everything's on water and there's a really good shootouts and stuff. It's very much like a 90s procedural like cop thing. But anyone who goes, I don't know if it has a Blu-ray or anything, but Hard Rain. Hard Rain is the disaster feature. I know that went on forever, but go watch Hard Rain because no one's seen it. It's only 97 minutes as well.
Nick, what 5 have you chosen?
I only have 2. Because I wanted to balance. Because again, like Jack said, it's a spectrum. Like disaster movies are a spectrum. There's so many of them. For the more entertaining blockbuster, I've actually chosen War of the Worlds by Spielberg.
Oh, great choice!
That's a horrifying disaster movie. Honestly, watching it the first time. Man, like it's one of those post 9/11 type of movies that is using that type of iconography and memory of the pain and channels it into something that is harrowing, disturbing, grand in scope, but also very intimate narratively. I think that kind of does what Twisters was hoping to do, where you're seeing this large scale destruction, but from one person's perspective. And it always feels very visceral without sacrificing the spectacle of it. It's a very tight rope to walk, and Spielberg does it seamlessly, effortlessly. And also one of the few times Tom Cruise has played kind of a sleazeball. In this case, he's a deadbeat dad was to grow up during the movie and become a proper father, and it's a nice little character growth. The other choice, it's Melancholia. Jack. You didn't have to. It's a good film. What can I say? It's the anti-disaster movie.
I knew he would do it as well.
Because but it's good, and it captures the inevitability of the dread of just like a horror happening. And it's a film of 2 halves, where the first half you're seeing a woman who's absolutely depressed at a wedding. She does not want to get married. She has no real motivation to live, and then everyone finds out, oh shit, Nastor is or another planet is going to destroy us all. And the second half is just everyone else falling into depression and her just kind of like being almost glad that it's over. It's one of the most depressing films you can watch. Of course, it's Lars von Trier. But there is a lot of beauty in it and a lot of humanity. I think it's especially when the days we're living right now, where there's so much hopelessness for the future. I think it's important to focus on the present and not just what surrounds us, because if we get more and more worried about what could change, what could not change, and other people in the future and blah, 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 you're going to want to off yourself in one way or another. So don't do that, please. Try to enjoy the little parts of life as they come your way.
You sound like a Letterboxd critic reviewing Don't Look Up back in like
I
2021.
still haven't seen that, funnily enough.
Awful. Don't do it.
Is that your pick, Carson?
Yeah, shockingly not. I do this fun thing where I propose a question to you guys and then I just don't think about it. And then we get on the podcast and we get halfway through and I'm like, oh, wait, I also have to answer that. I have 3 answers. Titanic is obviously
Classic.
up there. We just talked about it on an episode. Go check it out. If I really want to be a complete asshole, I could say First Reformed because that's dealing with the disaster that is current climate change.
Fair enough.
But the one I'm going to throw out is Deepwater Horizon. I just want to take everyone back to like 2018 where Peter Berg made like 3 really good films and we were like, wait a minute, this director is back. And then he made Mile 22 or whatever and it was like, just kidding, we're backing up unless you're Yakka Flash, and then he's still killing it better than ever before. Deepwater Horizon, fantastic. That whole era when he did like Patriots Day, like really good time in his filmography. Before that was bad, after that's bad, but you know what?
I think The Kingdom's not a
We'll
bad
always
little
have that.
feature as well in 2007 with Jamie Foxx and Battleship's a bad one. I thought you were going to say Wonder Woman 84. That's a
I
disaster
do
film.
like Wonder Woman 1984. That's a quite a good film, but
Yeah, but to be fair though, I actually quite like Mile 22 as well. But
well, we don't.
Peter
Need,
Berg,
that's
like,
not.
that's a great choice. Like, that's a great director. Like, he's a little bit too right wing for like to be in the like the discourse, but like Lone Survivor is like criminally underrated. What did you think of Patriot? Is it The Patriot?
Patriots Day, I think.
That's it. Yeah.
I quite liked it. I really liked it
I
actually.
went to the cinema to see that. And it was not fun. But that being slightly pedantic, like it was a very dire, dismal theater experience.
Yeah, I mean, definitely was not fun. I also went to the theater, but
pretty grim one.
Again, I was really drinking the Peter Berg Kool-Aid at this point because it was just like great film after great film, like in rapid succession. Also, like that came out not that long after Deepwater Horizon. I feel, if memory serves correct.
I think, yeah.
I think it was like January. I think it was like really quickly. I believe. Yeah. Also, Mark Wahlberg, like that was a weird, like good moment for him. Yeah. Again, didn't go Saving Joe Bell or whatever that was called. We went downhill quickly, but you know, we had that moment, didn't we? With that, let's get to our rapid reviews. Anything we've seen recently that we've not talked about on the podcast. I have quite a bit, so I'm going to try to get through mine. Finally watched A Quiet Place day 1. Look, as someone who didn't really like the first 2, the first one's fine, didn't like the second one, this is the best one of the franchise for me so far. Some logical jumps, some things really do not make sense here. If I was in this survival situation, I would survive while certain people died. But shockingly decent character work, shockingly decent action. The camera work here, the directing is really strong. Cinematography was great. I enjoyed it. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this film. I finally watched Sing Sing, debuted at TIFF last year, getting some Oscar buzz next year. Quite enjoy this. Coleman Domingo gives his best performance to date. The cinematography in this is like truly a work of art. Tells the story of a theater group in the Sing Sing prison and how they come together and like have this emotional outlet through theater. A really quite beautiful film that I loved. I saw Don't Breathe. I caught up with before Alien Romulus, which we're talking about next month. I finally watched Don't Breathe. I'm going to watch Don't Breathe too soon, Jack. Don't worry, you don't have to recommend it that hard to me. Quite formulaic at times, but I really loved. I thought it was really well constructed, really well put together. Some thematic choices, if we went into a full review, that like I don't know, specifically with how this film views Detroit, I feel is kind of weird. But as a horror film like this, it's probably the best you can get. I finally watched Deadpool and Wolverine. I know everyone is so excited. Calm down. We have a Patreon review coming soon, so I'll just say mixed results. And then finally, I watched Ozu's Early Summer, considering my like Kurosawa and Ozu summer. Quite liked Early Summer. A pretty like venomous film for Ozu, even in the context of like a lot of his films have a certain bite to them and sadness. But this one really gets into the emotions of post-war Japan and that era and that change in ideals in a point that I really enjoyed. So I definitely think that was one of the highlights of his career I've seen so far. So some good cinema I've been watching. Nick, what have you seen recently?
I've seen a lot. I'm gonna just like go through my letterbox from the past month or so and just focus on the highlights. Finally seen What's Up Doc, the Bogdanovich film. Hilarious, just like great entertainment cinema. I watched Girl Interrupted by James Mangold. It's okay. It's okay. So it's one of those movies. There's so many of those movies that like I watch and I realize I watched them way too late. If I'd seen it when I was like 15 or 16, it probably would have hit me very hard. Might even be a favorite. Watching it now at 27 is like, you know what? It's not for me. I've outgrown some of these things. I have finished almost completely the filmography of Terrence Davis. That was one of my goals for this year. I'm only missing Benediction. I'm like waiting for the right day to just like savor it, have a good cry while watching it, and just like closing off his filmography. But everything I've seen, Deep Blue Sea, Sunset Song, Quiet Passion, just like fucking great cinema, man. Poetic in the most touching ways possible. Had a couple of rewatches like Furiosa again, Rocky Horror Picture Show, Bad Lieutenant. I watched Bram Stoker's Dracula in the cinema. Just
Mhm.
man, it feels so good. Just like revisiting films that you like. It's just what you need when you're stressed because of work and other projects. I watched Maxine. I surprisingly, it wasn't one of my most anticipated films of the year, despite me having both X and Pearl in my top 10 of 2022.
Jesus.
Dreadful film. The worst film I've seen in the cinema in a long time. Just I was upset during it. I walked out like shaking my head, just like it's ain't good, man. It's not good. Wow, just felt so bad. I'm glad I got I wasn't on the episode when you recorded it, but I pretty much agree with everything you said. I probably would
True,
have
don't want to
been.
bring down our love of the film.
I
Yeah.
know.
Thank you
I'm
for that.
sorry.
Yeah.
I probably would have been meaner against it.
Oh, I don't know.
I had a
Oh,
weird first time watch. Cloverfield took me this long to actually
oh
watch the original
wow.
Cloverfield. The only time I'd actually seen it before at a restaurant in southern Italy in 2009, playing on one small monitor on mute. We're just like
What?
having we were just eating and just we had the film playing there. We went to the same place again and they had like a bootleg copy of Hancock playing, the Will Smith movie. Just like seeing Will Smith just saying some things, and then I don't know what was it like someone's head is put in their butt, whatever. I thought we would just stick with you. Speaking of iconography, rewatched The Matrix Resurrections. Something I
Fucking
wanted to do since
yes.
2021. Perfect film. Gave it 5 stars. Cried. I loved it. Loved it. And then the only other I've watched a lot of comedies as well recently, just to kind of like lighten the mood, to decompress. Top Secret, really great parody type movie. Lots of great visual gags. Hot Rod, bit disappointed by it. Love me Andy Sandberg, big fan of Popstar, Never Stop, Never Stopping. This film, it's very terrible pacing, but all right stunts. I finally watched Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, because the Bob Dylan trailer came out. I was like, I need to watch this movie because every time there's a new musical biopic, people talk about Dewey Cox, and it is as good as people say. I was surprised by that. Not only did I laugh, but I think it's as genuinely good film in its own right. Like the story progresses and the music in it. It's like, man, just a funny comedy that we rarely get of this kind anymore, unless they go like straight to Netflix, looking like absolute garbage. And I closed up with A Violent Nature. I love slashers. I love slow cinema. Didn't love this film because it wants to be both a very fun, gruesome slasher, and also it wants to be this like, kind of like deconstructing serial killer and the genre. But it's like you're not deconstructing anything. You're just like taking a very, very long time to get some very, very nasty kills. You are enjoying the violence. You're not commenting on it in any way that's even vaguely interesting. It has a very confused identity. I mentioned that I think it should have been and would have wanted to be more like Gus Van Sant's Elephant, because it has a lot of those tracking shots that are taking a long time. It's just people walking, building dread and anticipation. But then it feels like you're playing a video game. He's like, oh, I'm controlling Johnny or whatever the killer is, just like walking through the woods, and then we get to the QTE where we finally get the cool kill. It's like, why? Imagine if they actually took, and they do it for like one or two kills, they take an actually methodical, slow approach to them that I appreciate. It's like, okay, it should be more of this. But then it has like some gratuitous, nasty kills that are just a bit much for the type of film that it's trying to be. Anyway, rapid reviews. Was a long month. It's been a while since I've been here.
That's true. Jack, what have you seen recently?
Well, Hancock is interesting because that's directed by Peter Berg as well and has a cameo by Michael Mann. And that's as positive as we get.
Right! Peter, I forgot he did that.
Yeah, it swings around about. Michael Mann has a cameo in it, but I don't know why. I also watched Deadpool and Wolverine. I went to a night. I tried to go for a double showing with this and Twisters. Within like 10 minutes of them, I had to wait like 40 minutes for Twisters. So I was going to go at 9:15 a.m. for Deadpool, which I wish I would have done and waited the hour. But I went at 10 o'clock, so I only had half an hour difference in there. Just like the screening was just like exactly what you'd think. It was like people were dressed in like Wolverine Marvel t-shirts, which I've got no problem with, understandably, like that. But it was like packed full of people like that. And it was interesting to watch it in an audience. I know that you've done the Patreon, so I don't want to get too much into it because I can't wait to hear what everyone has to say about it because the reviews have just been all positive. So I can't wait for you to elevate the film again. But it was just interesting to watch it in an environment where people like laughed at the jokes at the expense of themselves, but not in an unironic way. It was like, or maybe it is an ironic way. I don't know. There'll be like a thesis of this in the next like decade about, but these people were laughing at the jokes at them watching this shit. And I thought it was fun for the most part. I give it like 3 stars. I thought it was fun. What they're doing in the final act of this, it feels like a constant reshoot, or it was shot first, because like there's just like a CGI Hugh Jackman in like the whole of the final act, which I don't know if it's to do with his cutting weight because of his skin cancer diagnosis. I don't know if it's cutting weight his age or the time age it was. At the time he had to do it in. I don't know what the factor is there. I don't think he had to cut the weight, so why they have to do that in the film and show him like Uncanny Valley like 3 or 4 times is like really weird. There's some cool cameos in it, like a character from like 1999 was fun, the early 2000s. The others not so much, but it was all like at the expense of like the audience. Like it's like fanfare at the end about 20th Century Fox. Like, they had the gall to do the Fantastic Four stick thing behind the scenes. And there's a certain director who wasn't showing me who made the first 2 X-Men and the other 2 that were somewhat successful. There's definitely a conscious choice not to show him behind the scenes, but it was fine. It was interesting to watch it in the film cinema with everyone else, and people were arguing about being tech heads and stuff. It sort of grind my gears. I caught a very early screening, probably the last one that's going to be shown because I think it's all on digital anyway. Is Bad Boys 4. I loved it, like seriously loved it. I'll be very brief here because I sorry to say my view, but this feels like a conscious effort from its actor to change the resemblance of a character, which is Mike Lowry, because of the issues he's had in his private life. I'm not going to say issues, quote unquote, but social interactions in the public eye. And finally, it's sort of changed him to look at his characters and try to change that and not be one dimensional. The camaraderie between the two of them is outstanding. It's very much more personal. Morality questioning type of feature. The editing's really like engaging. It's very much like you say QTE stuff. It very much is like that as well. But there's no way that you watch this and you hear about the Batgirl thing. Something's not quite right there. There's something really badly happened on Batgirl compared to this, because how you can say that these two are not competent or that was unreleasable after these have shot it, that doesn't make any sense. But it might be it might just be a different tonal direction. I don't know. But really good fun. It felt like a Southern Comfort, Man on Fire connection, like Tony Scott and Walter Hill, which I adore those filmmakers coming together against like another third one was like Beverly Hills Cop meets maybe like 48 Hours or Red Heat. So it was interesting to see a lot more darker version of it. The other 2 recent ones I've seen. Let me just go into my review of schedule because this is where it gets a bit gnarly. I can't remember where I stopped, so I'm going to be quite quick here. In prep there's going to be a lot of prep work here for features that I watched or I'm going to watch, so I do apologize if you feel like really random. I watched Jeff Nichols' Midnight Special, after 10 years after it came out. Really liked it. I think Jeff Nichols is an interesting filmmaker. This is for the bike riders. Very interesting to watch. I haven't seen a lot of his work, if not any of it, bar that and Mud, which I always thought was a David Gordon Green thing, but that's Joe. Matthew McConaughey and Nicolas Cage, like mirrors of each other. Really liked it. Really liked Adam Driver because that was the big thing after Force Awakens. Thought Michael Shannon's very very strange as a father, very good, but he has like a very very strange and very personal and like immersive, not immersive, but like invasive father like screen presence. And I thought Joel Edgerton's like really good. He'll come back a bit later. I watched a 35mm scan of Killer Clowns with my wife, which I thought was appalling but fun, like genuinely appalling to watch, but it was fun. I tried to watch the extended cut of Wyatt Earp, the Lauren Kasdan, um, Kevin Costner thing, but it's only available on there's a disc in VHS. Excuse me. So I couldn't watch the theatrical cut, which is still 3.5 hours long. Jesus wept.
Such a long film, man.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's so
it's very meandering. It like follows him from like a child to his like end of days in Alaska, but then cuts out the bit when he was like in early Hollywood. He was like the stunt or like the advisor on the westerns, which is very interesting. Like his whole life's really interesting, but it's very much meandering, like plodding along. It's non-linear at the beginning, so we start at Tombstone, and we cut back, and then we get back to OK Corral, and it's just all very mundane. It was fun, but it was very very mundane, and I'm never watching the extended cut. For prep for Twister and Twisters, I watched Into the Storm, which could very much be like a sequel to Twister. There's an interesting thesis behind that, but the abstract of it, of how it's shot, is criminal. It wants to present itself as like handy cam, shaky cam, but cuts in and back and forth to like reality. So we'll be in a car, shot like with a camera that's a handy cam, but no one's shooting on the handy cam, and on angles that are impossible. Then we'll cut back with someone running with it. It's all just like impractical, very like lack of immersion. But it's an interesting vehicle to watch in set piece compared to Twisters, because I think that Into the Storm gets it, whereas Twisters doesn't. So do watch Into the Storm. It's a forgotten little thing. It was interesting. I know Jacob Flash fucking hates it, but then he also hates Twisters, so fair play to him. I watched Cop Out. Just naff. Boring.
the Kevin Smith one.
Yeah, just boring. Has no visual flair. Has no personality. Them two like are just torture to watch on screen. I don't know what he's doing, Kevin Smith. There, I don't know what that choice is. There's a before and after that film with him, and I think it's a one that is a deep cut. Unfortunately for him, I watched Clint Eastwood's Changeling with Angelina Jolie because it's July and I want to watch the Jolie film, and I think I'm going to watch Taking Lives. God forbid DJ Caruso. Academy Award winning director there. Really good film, very dark, very, very, very interesting, very feminist type of approach. I think Eastwood, I said this on Uncut Gems, gets this detractor of being right wing. No. Watch Clint Eastwood's films and take note of the context and where they were made. Dirty Harry is a comment on vigilantism, again, because the LAPD or the San Francisco Police Department didn't do what they were meant to do by helping people who needed help, and they were like a racist, xenophobic fucking gang. I think then you watch like his Tightrope, which is him making a Jarlo film, incredible. Then you watch like Pale Rider and the Plains Drifter, like really interesting supernatural subverted tales on the cowboy. And with Changeling, it's like this forefront about equal women's rights, about putting this woman first because no one else did, to believe her in a situation where, not in a patriarchal sense, but also a masculine sense, where everybody had a comment, everyone had an idea of what to do and what to save her with and how to help, and just never give her faith. And how it's shot at the end with how someone gets hanged, incredibly visceral, really well executed. I think he sort of lost his way after with Hereafter, which I probably will review next week, so I'm going to watch that. But again, really good. But just a note here, I'm actually going to edit this film myself and put it into chapters, because it's 2 hours and 20 minutes, and God forbid does it make you feel every single second that it makes you age. It needs to be split up into chapters, not in a non-linear fashion, but it needs to be split up to have an epilogue and prologue. Because Jesus, I'm almost there now. On the Joel Edgerton thing, I watched The Stranger on Netflix. Incredible. The fact that that's based on a true story in Australia of how they had this procedure of how to try and get this guy to admit about murdering someone, and it done in such like this, again, I've got to keep on saying this word, but a visceral, textured manner of a guy having literal nightmares about being in this guy's waking moment and watching them groom and manipulate a killer who in turn is trying to groom and manipulate him is fascinating to watch. It has one of the best final frames I've seen with someone just raising their hand. Incredible. If you like long legs, go watch this. Really good stuff. Very much more like the down to earth. I'm going to be very quick about this one. I watched the super duper cut of Deadpool 2. I don't know why. I watched it at the cinema when it first came out. Watched the extended cut. It was fine. I'm done with that. I just thought it was boring after a while. And then last but not least, which was last night, I watched Cooties with my wife. Has anyone seen Cooties?
The Elijah
Yes.
Wood one, right?
I love that film.
That was nice.
I went to watch I was invited in London 10 years ago to watch a preview of that cut of the film before it was released with Universal NBC with my university. I haven't seen it since, and I've wanted to watch it for a long time. And I watched it with my wife, and we both loved it. I don't know why that's not got a cult status, and it's got like middling to average reviews. But for like a comedy, Lee Winnell's in it, plays someone crazy. Rainn Wilson, Elijah Wood. It's like an Argento Romero riff. It's really fun. It sort of like scares me that no one finds that film fun anymore. But if anyone wants to watch like a camp comedy horror for October, go watch Cooties. It's really good fun. But that was it. But I'm gonna watch. I'm gonna admit this. I'm gonna admit this live. I'm going to get back into Star Wars.
Oh no.
What do you mean by that?
You're watching Mandalorian?
Sorry, I'm going to watch. I'm going to finish Andor. I'm going to watch TV cuts. Not TV cuts, sorry. I'm going to watch film fan edit cuts of Boba Fett, Acolyte, and Ahsoka. And gang, I'm going to watch the sequel trilogy again. I've got to do it. It's been a long.
Why? Yeah, why?
Don't, Jack.
Because I just want to watch them again. Right, I'm getting choked up here because I need to watch these again. But I'm going to watch fan cuts of them all because I can't watch what eventually was revealed to us audiences. I've got a 35mm cut of Phantom Menace. I've got a 35mm cut of Revenge of the Sith, which look incredible. We've already watched the 35mm cut, despecialized vision of Star Wars on ClapperCast as well. I've got like 3 different alternate cuts of Phantom Menace, multiple different cuts of everything else, a 4-hour cut of Revenge of the Sith. I'm going to do it, gang. I don't know when, because they're all getting released in October. September, August, October. That's how the months go. And they're all getting released at the Odeon, but I think I'm going to watch them all and fan editions. Because someone sent me a black and white Kurosawa cut of Revenge of the Sith. And it starts in all Japanese writing, like the early Kurosawa Shaw Brothers films do. And gang, it looked incredible. It really did look cool. And I'm excited to look at the TV shows because I'm not watching 10 hours of The Acolyte. I'm not doing it. So I'm going to watch fan film cuts of them because I just think I think fan edits are really interesting. And someone sent me like, I don't want to keep on saying someone as if like there's someone out there, but I've found a work print cut of the Super Mario's 1993 film, which I might watch as well. There's just this year doing Gems and doing ClapperCast, doing the Blockbuster. There's so much cool stuff out there for guys and girls and others who don't have to watch Twisters, And I think we've had this chat for a long time, Carson. There's so much out there, and I would rather watch a fan's version of Skywalker, whatever it's called, than watch the J.J. Abrams monstrosity. And I think that's where I've come down to it.
I just don't know if you can say there's so much out there, so I'm going to watch the Book of Boba Fett, right? Like, I just don't know if you can.
Yeah,
I don't know if that logically adds up.
Yeah,
but valid.
Book of Boba Fett.
Also,
right.
fan edit, and it's a film cut of it, so it is different. I just need to do it. I've watched a bit of Andor. I've enjoyed what I've seen. I don't know what else to say. I didn't even want to mention this, but I think I'm going to watch Star Wars again.
Well, when you walk away from Rise of Skywalker or whatever that one is called and you love it this time, I'll be there.
I don't see that happening, but I'm very much looking forward to them. I haven't seen Last Jedi since 2017. I'm looking forward to that, and I don't know. I'm sure there'll be some reason for it,
One of
I'm
our
sure we'll
big
hear like a
bonding moments.
20-minute therapy session.
There's only so many. Yeah, there's only so many Oz Perkins films I can watch and be like, I like this guy. Why have I got to wait another 5 years? I don't have many Tony Scott movies. And Napoleon director's cut's coming out. The Gladiator 2. After that, Carson, we're on thin ice.
That's the watch list. Oz Perkins, Ridley Scott, all the Star Wars films.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. Well, thank you both for joining us for the Twisters review. We will be back next week on our Patreon. So the Patreon's going to be a little bit busy, actually. We have July's coming out, which is Deadpool and Wolverine. Then we're starting off with August, getting it right out of the way with Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, part of our summer blockbuster series. So that will be fun. And then here on the main feed, we'll be back in 2 weeks to discuss M. Night Shyamalan's Trap. Finally here. I was just in LA and every single billboard is about Trap, and I was like, yes,
wow.
We're doing it. We're here. I'm excited. So we'll get there when we get there. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next. Oh, well, let's find where we can find everyone on social media. Sorry, of course. Jak, where can we find you on social media?
If you want to hear any more ramblings that Carson's just let me go on for 10 minutes about therapy, about Star Wars, you can probably hear a lot more of it on Letterboxd. At that username at Jak-Luke Sharp, but you can find me on Clapper, where I'll be dropping, I'm hoping, Axel F review. Nick's Twisters review is dropping soon, and all that good stuff. And then you can find me on X, but I wouldn't bother. I'm not really into that anymore. I've gone down the shit. But you can find me on there, the username at Jak-Luke Sharp.
Nick?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at NickyGrind97, where you can find all of my short films and videos, as well as a crowdfunding for my new upcoming film, Never My Love, which is filming at the end of August in Berlin. So go on those profiles. You're going to find links there if you want to support the project and get some good goodies like posters, commentary tracks, and other good stuff.
You can also find that in the description below, of course. You can find me on Twitter at BP_movie reviews, Letterboxd, just Carson Timar. Thank you so much for listening again, and we'll be back with both Deadpool and Wolverine and Lord of the Rings this week. Should be fun. See you then.